or a plane crash, the TV cameras are always there. And of course, I'd grown up in San Diego, so a local boy in plane crash in Mexico, hadn't lived in San Diego for years. But they take me off the plane. I evidently was awake, but I don't remember it. I was still in a comatose state. My grandmother was there to meet me, and I said, "Grandma," when she said my name. They wheeled me into the emergency room. My mother flew from Medford, Oregon. They live in Roseburg. They came down from Medford. And they took me into surgery finally on Friday night. This is now Thursday when we finally are arriving. It took 30 hours to rescue us. Arriving there in San Diego, and they discovered in my operation that I had a broken back in the L1, L2 vertebrae. Now, you two as therapists will understand this. Now, typically, your spinal cord ends at vertebrae L1, L2. But they discovered a birth defect in mine. They discovered that my spinal cord was an inch shorter than normal, up above the fracture line. And so the cord itself was not broken, but the nerves were mangled, cut, and bruised. Mike McKenzie, who broke his back at L1, L2, they found a birth defect in him too. His spinal canal was larger in diameter than normal and gave room for the compression against his cord. And Mike is walking without crutches. I don't know what Janet Long's miracle was. She broke a vertebrae T11, is there a T12 too? And L1? But she's walking with crutches. I don't know what so 3 broken backs, and all 3 of us are walking with one degree or another. That's just unheard of medically. Now, I visited OMSI in Portland many years ago. We used to take the kids there when they were younger. And OMSI had a very special display. It was called Body Worlds. And Body Worlds is a gentleman who's taken cadavers and he plasticizes them. And here is a display they had of the human neurological system. There's a brain up there, you can see the brain, there's a spinal cord, there's a real human system, and all the nerves that come off that spinal cord. We are an incredible electricity system attached to the muscles and the nerves. We are an electrical component. And I looked at that picture and I understood better what was cut, mangled, and bruised. It was those nerves coming off at the bottom there, off that cord, but the cord was intact. God was in control, and He has fearfully and wonderfully made us. When they tell you that we evolved out of muck in a slime pit with just potential, what could have happened here or there. No, my friends, we were created with design. Do you hear me? You didn't come from a pollywog into a fish and then to some kind of a arachnoid and then maybe to an ape and then to a human. No, you came from the hands of a creator, and when you were formed in the womb, as David said, you gently knit me together perfectly. You're fearfully and wonderfully made. After the surgery, they brought me out. I was in a comatose state still. They put me on a respirator. There's my mother with me in the intensive care unit. You can see my left leg, which is broken. I'm on a respirator. My good friend and one of the professors from Andrews University happened to be in San Diego that week, Steve Case, and he was there to give assistance to my mother. And you can see I'm not breathing on my own. 24 years old. And my heart was starting to give out. My mother thought I was going to die that Saturday night. They were not sure if I would make it through, but on Sunday morning I was still alive. And I've got so many stories I could tell. I'll tell this one because it's just too demonstrative of how God can work for us. My mother was talking to me, trying to get my mind to come back to see if I could remember something from way back, and she was playing cassette tapes of when I was in Academy, Milo Academy, and I was singing in the choir, and she was playing these tapes, and she said, on one of the songs, I woke up and opened my eyes. And she said, Lynn, you remember that music, don't you? She said, I nodded yes. And then she said there was a sermon on the tape. It was a sermon that I'd spoken as a student for a student week of prayer. She said, I slipped back into the coma. It must have been an awfully boring sermon. And then she said there was another song that came on the tape. It was a trio that I'd sang in my senior year in Academy. And she said, I opened my eyes again, and I began to cry and to sob and to heave there on that respirator. She says, Lynn, you remember that song, don't you? She said, I responded, yes. She said, just to remind you, that song is Rise Again by Dallas Holm. You're singing it in a trio your senior year. And I realize that today is Easter Sunday, and I believe you're going to rise and walk again because of the power of God in your life. Now that gave my mother such courage at that point. I used to think my mother was old in her 40s. She was 46. I realize now how young she was. She's 77 now. But boy, what the trauma I put her through there at that age when I was 24. But God gave her that little window, that breath of fresh air through that song and that occasion. That was March 30. I don't have any memory though until April 1 when I was off the respirator and I woke up in the intensive care unit. April 1, what day is that? April Fool's Day. Isn't God funny? Isn't he funny? He wakes me up on April Fool's Day. I'm awake there in the intensive care unit, and I'm saying, where am I? What's going on? They said, you're in San Diego. You're in intensive care. I was in a plane crash. Did you know that? Yes, we know all about that. Well, how did I get to San Diego? Well, that's a long story. We'll tell you about it later. But wow, what's going on here? And the nurses are there, and I said, well, where's my mother? Where's my father? I knew they were there somehow. Well, they brought them in later, and I said to my mom, hi. She says, what are you doing awake? I said, I don't know. Was I out? I'm supposed to be awake. You've been out for 7 days. I tell you, when you're in a comatose state, understand this. Never speak negative words around a person in a coma because they can hear you. And their body reacts to how you're talking about them. I remember my cousin Annette came to visit me. I had a full conversation with her. No, I didn't, but I thought I was. And had they been saying, oh, he's terrible looking, he's going to die, who knows what that would have done to my immune system to suppress it. Speak comforting and loving words, because the last thing to go, as they say, is your hearing. Well, I'm awake there. They started putting me in a hyperbaric chamber, actually when I was still in the coma, to try to break up what they thought was keeping my brain in a coma. They thought it was a fatty emboli that came from my broken left leg that had gone through the heart and into my brain and lodged itself there. They were trying to break that up. I'm here starting to wake up. I'm in this hyperbaric chamber. They're saying, relax, we're going to take care of you. I thought they're going to kill me. I had some movie going through my mind, the Andromeda Strain, about these mad scientists, and they're trying to kill me, and I'm hallucinating on the codeine and all the rest of it. And I'm in there hallucinating. There's a TV up there on the wall. You can see it, and it's playing news about Muammar Gaddafi blowing up planes all over the world and all the terrorism. And Ronald Reagan sending in the troops to Gaddafi to wipe him out. And all of a sudden, the communists were inside the tube with me. And Gaddafi was in the tube with me. And they were chasing me. No, I'm scared. Oh, get me out of here. I'm pounding on the glass. And they're giving me more drugs, as I'm trying to figure out what's going on. And the communists are there with their drugs. With their machine guns. And then all of a sudden, Buck Rogers showed up and he saved me and shot all of them. I don't know where Buck came from, but he was there and I was thankful to him. Now, understand, I never watched Buck Rogers as a kid, but I guess somewhere, I must have watched him. But when you're hallucinating, you're weird, all right? And I don't know why people take drugs, because I want my mind to think sharp and to be in control. I don't know about you. Finally, they got my dad to come in there and sit next to me, and just his presence calmed me down. They quit giving me all those narcotics, and I got through the treatments. And by that way, that hyperbaric chamber, we're there in San Diego in the hospital, the only hospital in hundreds of miles that had one. That machine is what brought me out of the coma, that shrunk down that fatty emboli. They use this with divers when they have bends, and they use it with other people. It creates an environment that you're in, and the oxygen level is so high. It's the kind of environment that scientists are saying was around the surface of the earth, under the firmament, on the second day of creation. And that's why plants and trees and people were bigger before the flood, because they were in this biosphere. And in that biosphere, there was healing. They take burn victims and put them in these machines. They heal faster. I'm so grateful that God had that machine there in San Diego at the trauma center. Here's a picture of Mike McKenzie, the youth pastor from Andrews University. The TV cameras are there to talk to him, to interview him. I didn't see Mike for 2 or 3 weeks because he was in a separate room down the hall from me. But finally, when we finally got to reunite, it was like, oh, Mike. We were just like, wow, what we had gone through. In the hospital there, I was receiving many cards, many flowers. And one day a nurse brought in a stack of cards to my room. And she laid them on my table there. She says, who are you? I said, what do you mean? She says, you've got so much mail day after day after day. You're getting hundreds of cards. The mayor was in the hospital last month and he didn't get this much mail. Who are you? I said, I'm nobody special, but I love Jesus. And these are friends of mine that are trying to encourage me. I remember this stack of cards that came in. There was a bunch of students that had made cards. And when students make cards at school, it's really fun. And one boy had it on this card, an airplane with a guy falling out of the airplane. And it says, "Too bad." And I laughed. I knew what he meant. Too bad this happened to you, you know. Kids' cards are so amazing. They're so funny. And the teacher for that group of students on that stack of cards had included a card, and there's a promise there for me from Psalm 116, verses 1 through 9. And that teacher hand wrote this verse out for me, and I read it there in my bed. And I want to read it for you now because this became my theme set of verses for what God was doing in my life. The words will be on the screen. Oh no, it's out of order. Hang on here. Hang on. I'm going to go forward and see. Okay, we'll go forward and we'll go back. All right, that's what we'll do. All right. I love the Lord, for he heard my voice. He heard my cry for mercy. Because he turned his ear to me, I will call on him as long as I live. Death stared me in the face, and the anguish of the grave came upon me. I was overcome by trouble and sorrow. Then I called on the name of the Lord. O Lord, save me. The Lord is gracious and righteous. Our God is full of compassion. The Lord protects the simple-hearted. When I was in great need, he saved me. Be at rest once more, O my soul, for the Lord has been good to you. For you, O Lord, have delivered my soul from death, my eyes from tears, my feet from stumbling, that I may walk before the Lord in the land of the living. And I read those words and I began to sob. He saved me. I'm paralyzed from the waist down. And his promise is that I will walk before the Lord in the land of the living. You know now that I walk. I walk with crutches. I have weak legs. But I spent 3.5 years in a wheelchair when they said I would never walk. And by God's grace, I walk. And that promise, I shared that. I took that passage, that card, I put it in my Bible, I saved it. That was my promise. There in San Diego, 3.5 weeks, they finally decided I'm going to go fly to Portland, Oregon for rehab. They put me took me on an air stretcher out to the airport to an air evac jet, and I looked at that plane. I said, "That's not any bigger than the one I crashed in. I can't fly in that." "That's the only way. It's either that or ambulance." "No, you're going to fly in that plane, buddy." So they put me in that plane. My mother's in the front seat. I was scared to death. I don't know why, you know. Took off that runway. We fly. Took 8 hours to get to Portland. They hit headwinds that were just so traumatic. Got me there to Portland, and they put me on an ambulance and sent me over to the Rehabilitation Institute of Oregon, Rio. And I'm there in therapy, the first day of therapy, and my therapist looks at me. She says, "You're never going to get any better than this. You're paralyzed." I said, "Well, then what am I doing here? Send me home. Of course I'm going to get some better, aren't I?" "Well, we're going to get you in a wheelchair, and we'll probably put long leg braces on you. And of course, you'll never need the long leg braces because you can't walk, you're paralyzed, and you'll be this way. You just have to learn to deal with it, guy." Oh, I was crushed. Just crushed. 5 weeks later, 6 weeks later, I was in my wheelchair speaking to the youth rally in Centennial High School in Portland, Oregon. Scared to death because I was different now all of a sudden. My legs didn't move. I could move my feet just slightly, but not much. Scared to death, 24 years old. Never going to get any better than this. I remember my parents took me on a walk one Sabbath around the hospital. It was April. It was beautiful. The tulips were coming up. The daffodils were blooming. I said, "Mom, I'm never going to walk again. I won't be able to be a pastor. I'm never going to be able to baptize anybody like I've always wanted to do." She says, "Listen, I'm going to show you how far you've come in these last 5 weeks." And she pulled out of her purse some of the pictures I've been showing you. And she began to tell me my own story. She says, "Do you see how far you have come in 5 weeks? You're going to work hard. You're going to do therapy. No matter what that gal has told you, you're going to push forward and trust God, and you're going to go in your wheelchair and you're going to tell your story in churches all over the city of Portland. I'll arrange for it. And you're going to praise God, and you're going to do it. I'm thinking, yeah. What's mom know? Well, I found out later that moms know an awful lot. And the best advocate you can have if you ever have an illness is your mom or your dad or an aunt or a grandmother or somebody who cares deeply for you. That was my mom. And I've got a wife like that with some illnesses that we've dealt with in our family, and she's been my kid's best defender and friend. Still is. And I tell you what, if you don't have a good relationship with your mom, try to make it right. If you've got an aunt that you can maybe turn to, or a grandmother, but don't wipe out the women in your life that brought you to where you are, all right? We need them, and God provides for us. Here's a picture when I flew back to Andrews University to speak for the 8th grade graduation. I was in my wheelchair, but I'm starting to stand in crutches, as you can see. There's Andrew and Jenny and Cindy and Steve and Pastor Mike. But remember, even though I'm standing, my legs really don't move much, all right? I'm just kind of standing there. I've got a body brace on because of my broken back. I finally went home to Roseburg to begin outpatient therapy. And there in outpatient therapy, my new therapist, who was a member of our church, she said, "Lynn, you are going to get better." And she took my long leg braces and cut them down to short leg AFOs. Is that what they call them? The little plastic things around your feet. The guy who's cast those, by the way, he was drunk the day he came in to cast them. And so he put my foot at the wrong angle. I mean, it was, $2,500 for these leg braces, and the guy's drunk, But anyway, Nancy said, we're going to get in the bars and you're going to learn, you're going to struggle, you're going to walk. Now, she told me she didn't believe I would walk again, but I'd been so broken down by my other therapist, she was trying to build me back up. We got water therapy going at the YMCA pool because my legs were lighter in the water. They put buoys on my ankles, began to do abduction, what's that called? Abduction exercises. I began to walk in the water because I'm lighter in the water. The resistance was giving me exercise, and I'm walking in that pool with a life jacket on. But that's where I began to learn to walk. It was in that pool. There's nothing like water therapy, and guess who told us all about water therapy and the hydraulics and hydraulics. Michael, whatever the hydro stuff. All right, I'm not a doctor, but it was Ellen White through visions that she received from God Himself. There is healing and understanding how the body can begin to heal itself. You too understand that as therapists. Walking, Nancy's encouraging me. And then through all of this, and there's a picture of me in my wheelchair at a home church in Roseburg. Yeah, I got a smile on my face, but I tell you, life was kind of tenuous. I was having problems with my eye vision. They did an MRI scan. This is the first MRI machine in the city of Portland, all right? Huge. It would fill this room. The magnets on it were so strong they couldn't take my wheelchair in there because they thought it would suck it up into the thing. They take my watch off, my belts off. I of course shunts in my brain. They're hoping my brain is up to the thing, I was so scared in that hyperbaric chamber. I'm laying in there. Have you ever been in a hyperbaric chamber? Anybody been in one? Noisy, knock, 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 brrr, and you're in there, and you're holding still, and you could feel things around you, and you can't move, and oh my word. I learned to finally fall asleep in the thing as they took several pictures. Then they're an hour and a half. That's how long those scans were back in the day. And they discovered in the middle of my brain, it looked as if I had a brain tumor. Unrelated to the accident. On the brainstem. In the pineal gland. And when the doctor told me that, I was realizing I was facing death from a brain tumor because they didn't know what kind of cancer it might be. They thought it might be a neoblastoma, which would have killed me within 3 weeks. And I became angry with God. I said, God, what kind of God are you? You saved me in a plane crash and now you let me die of a brain tumor? I was angry with God. And I want to tell you all this. It's okay to be angry with God at times, all right? And to argue with Him. He can handle it. He's got broad shoulders. Do you hear me? So be real with God. You don't have to have flattering words all the time. You don't have to have prayer cards. Talk to God as to a friend. It says in the book, Steps to Christ. I was scared. I was arguing with God. We finally found a surgeon. I'm shortening the story up here. We found a surgeon at the University of Oregon Health Sciences University Hospital. His name was Ed Newelt. He was a 38-year-old neurosurgeon, Jewish, a brilliant man, only one of 3 surgeons in the world who knew how to operate on that part of the brain without doing major damage. And here he was in Portland, and I'm fighting God. I don't want surgery. I want you to heal me. I was anointed again for that, and in fact, I'd been anointed. Now I gotta back up. I was anointed at Pacific Union College. I went down, and the symptoms seemed to go away, and it was better. And then they came back with a full vengeance, and I'm fighting God and not seeing His hand. I'm telling Him what He's got to do. By the way, you can't tell God what to do. He has a plan for you, and He wants us to submit ourselves to His plan. Does that make sense? But I had to fight and learn that. I'm scared to death, even though Dr. Newelt is one of the top scientists in neurology, known around the world. And I'm arguing with God, and one day I'm in the shower. I'm sitting on my shower stool, and the water's beating on my chest, and I'm arguing with God. I said, listen, God, you got to heal me. You better do it my way, and you better get it over with quick. Because Dr. Newelt said in the surgery I could be in a coma for 2 days to 2 months. I could be I could be blind. I could be paralyzed on the left side. I could be a mental vegetable. But he had to go in, otherwise I would die. I'm sitting there on the shower as the water's beating on my chest, and I finally said, okay, God, I give it over to you. I submit my will. I know if I die, there's a resurrection, and you will raise me again. And at the moment I said to God He could do whatever He wanted with me, suddenly from the right-hand side of the shower, this shower of peace just flooded my heart. It just washed it. It was like that cloud of peace in the airplane. And suddenly the presence of the Holy Spirit was in that shower, and I felt the peace rush over. The back weight on my back seemed to roll off, and I started to cry. I began to sob because I realized it was now in His hands. And when you submit yourself into His hands, the promise is this: don't be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, make your request known to God, and the peace of God which transcends all understanding will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Philippians 4, 6, and 7. And it was so true. There he was again. And now I was eager to get to the hospital. It's been 3 weeks since they put a shunt in my brain. They're now ready for this major craniotomy. My mother had to fatten me up. They wanted her to put on 20 pounds on me. She did it in 3 weeks, so my word. Fat shakes, half and half, all the stuff you're not supposed to eat. But boy, it worked. And it's not stopped working. I got to be careful now. I couldn't gain any weight when I was a teenager. But boy, it's after 25, your metabolism changes, you know. Anyway, I finally went into the hospital on Mother's Day. I'm thinking about the fact that I could die. But because I knew what the Bible said about death, I had peace in my heart that I cannot describe to you as I went into that hospital. There's a passage that we read about the second coming of Jesus found in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verses 51 and 52. I just want to read these words briefly with you. In fact, why don't you read them with me off the screen, all right? Behold, I tell you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be what? Changed. Hold on to that changed part, okay? Here we go on now. In a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet, for the trumpet will sound, and the dead will be raised incorruptible, and we shall be what? Changed. You see, the dead will be raised. Those of us who are alive on earth when Jesus comes, we will be transformed Toss these crutches away. If you've got bad hips, new hips. If you've got an artificial knee, new knees. If you've got contact lenses flinging out of your mouth, glasses gone, braces flinging out of your mouth, new hearts, pacemakers gone, gray hair gone, hair back in place. I mean, looking good. In the moment, I mean, lose weight, liposuction. I mean, you watch out. It's going to be something else. In the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet, we shall all be changed. That's what was getting me through this process of knowing as I laid down on that operating table, as if it was a sacrificial altar, that even if I died, there was a better day. In fact, I almost wanted to die. I was 25 now. But I didn't want to die. I didn't want my parents to miss me. But I was ready to do whatever God wanted. And so we're there in the hospital, ready to go in. They've shaved my head from the first surgery. Now they're shaving my head again. By the way, I didn't look too bad bald. I wanted to have it done in different sections so I could see how I would look, you know. It's not too often that they do this. I went in for the long operation. They came in from the back side of my cranial cavity, skull. They cut off a part of the skull. They went into the middle of the brain. They operated for 8 hours. It was a long surgery. My poor parents, I can imagine what they had to deal with, thinking about that. And then I'm in the intensive care unit waking up. And I hear a nurse screaming, "He's waking up, he's waking up."